Hello again, and welcome to Chapter 9 or Unit 5A Sustainability at the Individual Level. So, in this chapter, we're going to look at how you as an individual can make some change towards a more sustainable future. And it's not always easy. We try to make little choices, and some people are better at it than others, and I admit that as well. And you can see it in the web in the background. You have things like sharing and policy and health and all kinds of things in there that go into making sustainability a not only a lifestyle in the sense that um, but it should be the norm going forward, and what you as a one person can do about that. And you would think there's not much, but that's actually not true. There's actually quite a bit you could do, and we'll take a look at that. This is a pretty short chapter, to be honest with you. There's only about 17 slides in it, so let's get going. So let's take sort of a broad view before we get started. In industrialized nations like America, Europe, China, and places like that, we account for the bulk of the extracting of the resources, the consumption of the resources, depletion of those resources, which we've talked about in previous chapters, along with destruction and waste production. We produce more waste than developing nations or poorer countries. Now, the negative impacts of those particular practices, such as depletion, extraction, and consumption, however, are disproportionately sort of leaped upon the poorest and most disenfranchised people on the planet. So, although we're using up all of the resources, the people who are the most affected by that practice are typically some of the poorest in the world. So going forward, we're going to look at how us as individuals can make changes towards that more sustainable future. The most common perception is that one person, the actions of myself, for example, can do very little in the face of what really needs to be done at a global level. What can I do? I'm just one person, right? However, it's not true, and there are many, many cases where one person has made a big difference, and sort of you have to just gain that momentum. So we as individuals contribute about one third of the greenhouse gases, for example, based on our energy habits, whether it be driving a car or drying clothes or heating our homes. We as individuals are accountable for all of these greenhouse gases. So it makes sense that the individual who's producing the pollution can make small changes to help to help make changes to reduce those emissions, for example. And if everybody does that, before you know it, even at the small individual level, if lots of individuals are doing it, a lot of that is being eliminated, a lot of those greenhouse gases. This is only done through small incremental steps that usually are a catalyst towards some large scale transformational change, whether at the national level. And it takes time, and these grassroots efforts sometimes do blossom into major issues that can be sort of used as a stepping stone in developing policies that'll help go forward with sustainable practices. Now, this is something I found pretty interesting in this particular chapter. The making of effective individuals, they have this thing called the theory of planned behavior. So people who exhibit characteristics of have a tendency to be more empathetic towards the suffering of others, compassionate, and you know these sort of they look around and they see all of the damage being done. Those are the people who have a tendency to gravitate towards these type of actions and goals and organizations. um, and the other half of that is if you don't exhibit those particular characteristics, and a lot of people don't. Yeah, I probably don't have that as much as I should either. But the other part of that is if, let's say, you're traveling somewhere and you see it firsthand, okay? If you see this stuff firsthand, you see these nasty dumps where a lot of people are just picking through the garbage, it probably will change your perception of a lot of things going forward, and you have a tendency to be more of an advocate for that particular cause. This happens all the time. It could even happen with the death of a loved one, and all of a sudden now breast cancer, if you have a loved one who dies of breast cancer, you sort of pick up that breast cancer cause and run with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. It's just it has a tendency, and we as human beings who don't have those intrinsic qualities of, I just want to go out and change the world. Most people aren't like that. There are people that are, but most aren't. It isn't until we see it firsthand that we have a tendency to step back, reflect, and go, whoa, I need to get involved in this. Now, this theory of planned behavior is kind of based on this, and it's in a nutshell, without getting all deep into psychology and sociology. It's basically how much are you affected by outside internal or messages in terms of what's influencing your overall decision making or your ideologies, your thought processes when it comes to these types of like sustainable problems. And there's you're being bombarded with it all the time. You see it in the news, you see it on certain commercials, um, but how much influence that holds on you is sort of what this entire little theory is about. So it's kind of an interesting model, just based on a purely humanistic point of view. And there are some people that are more susceptible to sort of the power of persuasion than others. This is especially true when it comes to politics, right? And I'm not going to go into politics, but it has a tendency to be passed down. So my parents were this, so now I'm that, and then I'm that. My kids are this, and that is sort of that the power of persuasion handed down generation to generation, and that's sort of your environment that influences you. That's not to say though, and now with social media, it's even more prevalent where you have, you know, I've even noticed that, a lot of my friends on Facebook, they're not necessarily super close to me, but you have a tendency that the old term is birds of a feather flock together, and that's definitely true. I'm a musician. Most of my friends are musicians. It's just something, a commonality we all have. If you're into cars, you're probably going to talk to a lot of other people that are into cars. And politics is the same way. If you have a tendency to lean left, you're going to probably have a lot more left-leaning friends or right-leaning friends. If you've right, either way. So it, it's a very interesting concept. Now there are barriers to change, and this is one of the things that, unfortunately is the case. There's uncertainty like right now with the pandemic especially, we all have this uncertainty in our economic future. Without getting too personal, I almost got laid off from UWM this semester, and there's still a chance I may next semester, and it scares you. It does. I have a steady income, I've been there for 20 years. So having that uncertainty has a tendency to people to back away from these types of um, uh, these causes, because they just want to focus on making sure they can get to their next paycheck, so to speak. Other barriers are things like exposure to marketing and advertising, and this one's huge. Whether you like it or not, Disney's the king of this. You watch the Disney channels, and my kids watched all that crap, all the Disney channels, and every commercial is for candy and sugary drinks and this, and oddly enough, my kids don't drink soda, so it didn't work all that well. But you have the other part of it, this, that leads to what's called hyperconsumerism, favoring single-use, disposable, upgradable products like cell phones, which we all have, and we all get new ones every couple of years. TVs, oh my God, the new 95,000-inch TVs coming out, right? um, at some point, they're going to make a TV too big for most living rooms anyway. But all these things, gaming consoles, the new PS5 and new Xbox drops, I think any day now, if not yesterday, it might have been. So all of these are barriers to change because people get bombarded with it, and it becomes ingrained in our sort of our buying practices, in our all of our headspaces. Hey, we got to get them hooked early. They want you to get hooked early. And it's the same thing with like the unhealthy foods and beverages that I mentioned that's led to the obesity problem in this country. That's a huge part of it. It's just the nonstop bombardment of the commercials for these types of products. We're all guilty. We all, I quit drinking soda purely because I just got sick of it. I have no other reason other than one day I'm just like, I don't want this anymore, and I don't drink soda anymore. It's not a weight thing. It's not anything else. I just, who knows why people do stuff like this. Now, there's other people that you have this ambivalency, and this is a big part of it, including myself. You get ambivalent, be thinking that nothing I'm going to do is going to make a difference, and that's one of the largest barriers to change, your mode of thinking towards a more sustainable future. Now, another thing, the last thing is, I'm going to read my other screen. I apologize, my head is kind of covering some of this up, but it's we've been so separated from where things are grown versus or where they're produced. For example, food is a big one. We all eat beef. I bought a chuck roast yesterday and made a pot roast for my family. I've never seen a cow get slaughtered. I've never been in the room with a cow that got slaughtered. So I go to the store, I pick it up, it's all wrapped in plastic, looks nice, it has a price on it, and I grab it. Well, that's part of that sort of apathy, this detachment of we are, where we're getting our products from and how they're actually produced. Cell phones is another great example. We all love our cell phones. Most people, I would say 99.9% of the people, have no clue how a cell phone works and actually what's in a cell phone to make it work, including all the rare earth and minerals. There's, precious metals, all these things that make a cell phone work, not to mention plastics and other toxic chemicals. So that when they trade theirs in, they're just like, they know we're very separated, especially in urbanized areas. Those people that work on farms and stuff, they have a bit more attachment to the land and understand how things are grown and where their food is coming from. But being that the bulk majority of the population in the world now reside in urban areas, there's definitely a huge detachment there. So how do we overcome these barriers? Well, you got to start at an early age and start getting, some people would call it being indoctrinated. And, I get that to a certain extent, but you have to at least show children through their education system how to that this is a thing, right? You don't have to shove it down people's throats. Just say, here's another way to look at things. We all know that we put gas in our cars and we put coal in, the power plants, but here's some alternatives. Let's explain how this stuff works and that this might be the future going forward. Frame the questions in a way to include everything, but sort of start to more highlight the alternative energy, because that's definitely the direction we need to go, because our resources are limited in terms of fossil fuels. So you want to constructively incorporate people as opposed to ridicule them. Nothing drives me nuts more than trying to understand a concept and have people look at you like you're an idiot because you don't get it, or you're still on the fence as to whether or not you believe it. I am not a tree hugger. I admit that. I'm not this conservationist. I don't have that in me. I've learned a lot doing this course and I'm starting to really think about things differently, but I'm not there yet. So should I be made fun of because of that? I'm a scientist. I look at everything from every aspect. And what I'm starting to see is what we're doing now is not working and we need to find alternatives. So that's me doing the work and trying to figure out the best practices going forward. The problem is a lot of people don't have that the time or maybe the understanding to get to that point. So if you're in some environmental group, you can't make fun of people because they or ridicule them because they don't agree with you. You have to educate, not ridicule. Now, I just mentioned earlier, reduce the constant exposure to our children to marketing and advertising campaigns. And in the book, it talks about an actual uh, piece of legislation that is doing just that, to start to help stem the tide of how much our children are exposed to these practices. I mean, everybody knows that the Coke products, and I'm not picking on anybody, but the soda products, the candy products, all those products, even tobacco has always been geared towards kids. They prove that even though it was denied and denied and denied. Everything is geared towards to get them hooked early, whether it be sugar, nicotine, caffeine, all these ice lattes and all that stuff. I don't drink coffee, so or any of that stuff. So all of that stuff is geared, it's sweetened and everything else towards younger and younger. I mean, I've seen, middle grade schoolers drinking that stuff in the morning. I wouldn't give my kid that. My kid's hyper enough. So, use social marketing as a tool to promote and promote sustainable behaviors. So, social marketing is saying, what are you do by doing this? Excuse me, by doing this, this is how you're benefiting the environment. And this is typically done by like governments themselves, sort of those, teachable moment commercials that you see once in a while, like only you can prevent forest fires. We've all seen that, I think, or at least my generation has. So the idea is to promote this via social marketing. Again, you don't want to sound preachy. What you want to do is educate. Here's what you can do, just you all by yourself, to make this a more sustainable future. So, individuals as effective agents of change. So, what does that mean? You know, again, getting past that, that's just me. I can't do anything on my own. How do we go forward getting past that barrier? Well, there are some examples and some ways to start to look at what you can do to be an effective agent of change. The importance of small steps. Exactly. That's what we've been talking about. Don't think that just by you doing one tiny little thing, it doesn't make a difference, because it does. I will admit, I really try hard and I've said this in previous slides, to recycle as much as possible. I don't preach it to my family because they get annoyed with that, but I will go around the house and find things, and if we miss something, a can gets thrown here, or a bottle or whatever, I try really hard to make sure those things end up in the recycling bin. Is it going to change the world? No, because I already have the bin there. I'm not exacting change per se, but you have to start somewhere. And I don't, with my crazy lifestyle, it might be the only thing I can do. Um, you got to start to, change your daily behaviors in small ways. And, you could also make transformational changes that affect others as well, whether it be speaking up at a local community meeting or something like that. Um, because what happens is when you do this, and I used the term before, tree hugger. Tree hugger is sort of a derogatory term. So you're sort of demonizing the environmental movement. And so when you say tree hugger, that usually is a kind of being mean towards that. That's why I said I'm not one. I've used that term before. I'm coming around. So and the other thing is this: don't stop at small scale activism. Like that's where I'm at. I'm at the very small scale. I haven't gotten to the point where I've moved outside my own home yet when it comes to any of this stuff. We'll see how things go. But supporting the large scale projects in various formats, whether it be, like I said, going to meetings at the city hall or whatever, those are the ones that are going to make the largest impact. But you as an individual can, by going to that meeting and maybe speaking up or showing that you support it, that does play a role in, let's say, the voting process to get something done. So don't think that just, by showing up, that helps as well. The other thing is don't let ego play the deciding role. And the example they use of this, and I've seen this many times because I work at a four-year university, is some student will start a project and they mean well and it's a good project. The problem is then they go and graduate. And then the project dies. So what you need to do is, rather than think about how you're going to do the project, think about how you can include others and recruit, so to speak. So when you're gone, in the case of let's say a college, when you're gone, that project is sustainable, which is the whole point of the project to begin with. So don't make it just about you. Get people involved, get them taught, get them to keep that project going after you're gone. So individual action can and has made radical changes in the world. There's numerous stories about how one person can change the norm. And what I did is I went through the book and I just here's some quick little examples. So you have this gentleman named Andrew, I forgot the R there, Briggle, um, who essentially got fracking banned in Denton, Texas. Now, Texas is oil country in this, that's where a lot of the domestic oil that we get in this country is from, is Texas. So for the fact that he went up against big oil and got fracking banned, at least in the town of Denton, that's pretty significant. This Sandra Steingraber um, successfully essentially got fracking banned in all of New York by it started out as trying to protect the Finger Lakes region in upstate New York, which is where New York City gets its drinking water from. So that would have affected more than just the area around the lakes. The Finger Lakes are highly protected because you can't even swim or boat in them because all of New York City's water comes from there. Um, so she was able to get fracking banned for the entire state of New York. And then I'm assuming it's brother sister. They developed a website for teens to get involved in volunteerism, especially specifically for environmental volunteerism. So and they did this website that sort of highlighted where they can go and for the people who wanted to get involved. And then 8-year-old Jamie Romeo started the Lake Ontario beach cleanup effort with 7 friends, which now turned into about cleaning up several thousand people a year, 26 miles of coastline, and about 10,000 pounds of trash every year are cleaned up because of an 8-year-old who started this. That's really cool. That's really impressive. Now, again, us as individuals, it all starts at home. If you want to make small scale changes, and these are small scale, this is where most people start. All right. Things about uh, the food you buy, the water you use, the energy, and how to manage waste are typically made at the household level. All right. I do all the grocery shopping and cooking. I like to cook. All right. So those decisions, whether consciously or subconsciously, are made there. I already know when I pick something up, oh, this has to be recycled. I know it sounds silly, but it's true. You don't even realize you're doing it. Now, most consumers will want what's called a return on investment or ROI, which is usually the deciding factor. What is it costing me, right? It's our pocketbooks. However, there are instances where sometimes having an initial investment will definitely pay off over time. And the example they give in the book is insulation for a house. So with by adding some insulation to the house, yes, you're spending money on the house, but that insulation will pay for itself over a very short period of time, maybe a year or two, and because you'll be saving up to 20% on your heating bills. So just something like insulation could play a huge role in bringing down your energy bills, which is less energy is less coal firing. Simple decisions like replacing incandescent bulbs with LED bulbs, replacing old appliances with ones that have the Energy Star rating, and if you really can, if you could buy an electric or a hybrid car, that'd be great. They are still pretty expensive, but there's what do you call it, tax breaks for that kind of stuff, along with installing solar panels on your house. Um, and like I mentioned, federal incentives for doing that, which can help offset the initial cost. There's I think in some places like a 30% solar panel tax credit. That's huge. I mean, that pays for about a third of what the initial startup costs are, and then over time, with the solar panels on, you're going to reduce your energy costs, especially for heating water, and that'll pay for itself over time as well. As an individual, if there are those that kind of take it to the next level, and those are called entrepreneurs. So an entrepreneur is an individual who creates a new business bearing most of the risks and enjoying all of the rewards. So they sink the money in and they get the money back. It could be new ideas, new goods, services. Now, in our realm, we have what's called a social entrepreneur, which is somebody who pursues those types of new businesses or applications or services, but willing to take on the risk and effort to create positive changes in society through their initiatives. So these are people who not only building a business, but building something that is going to help society in general. So they're not charities or welfare agencies. They are private businesses, but they put the emphasis on human values rather than strictly profit. And there's a number of these, and I'm going to show you that in the next slide here. So social entrepreneurs, and here's a little table of some of them. These are people who took the risk and tried really to build something, whether it be an organization, a service, or a product that helps sort of the common good. If um, To do this, you need to go back to that systems thinking that we talked about way back in like chapter 1 or 2. Probably don't remember that. But what it does is it helps these social entrepreneurs innovate and then integrate into current existing systems. So, we use the term status quo, and what that means is, that's the way we've always done it. Well, these people are trying to insert themselves into the status quo to sort of start that change. And they do that by, like I mentioned, bearing all the risk, but also getting all the rewards. Now, some of those are successful, some aren't, but they have a better chance to succeed when it looks at a specific sort of social or sustainable issue, like cleaning up ocean trash that we saw in chapter 8, the big ocean cleanup um, nonprofit agency. And then the businesses should partner with the communities as well. So if you're going to be a social entrepreneur, you have to align yourself with the local community leaders towards a common goal. And most of these successful social entrepreneurs produce a product or a service that empowers those individuals. So things that will make their lives easier. And the example they give in the book is the gentleman down at the bottom of that particular list, Muhammad Yunus, I don't know how to pronounce it, from Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh, if you don't know, it's a country right next to India. It's one of, if not the poorest nations in the world. It's pretty poor. And what this gentleman did was develop a bank, essentially. He was obviously rich from something. He developed a bank that sort of catered to poor people in terms of offering very, very easy to get loans at, with repayment methods that are doable. It keeps interest rates low, things like that. He won a Nobel Peace Prize for doing this because it allowed thousands of people to start to get out of the poorest of the poor and sort of elevate themselves to empower themselves to, you know, get more ahead in life. So there are those people out there that are able to do this. They take this social entrepreneurial um, stewardship and they promote it and they push it and they get things done typically within some type of community where they're from. Now, another aspect of social entrepreneurship and working as an individual towards a sustainable future is you have to work with organizations. Um, you have to share this with ideas with people who have a similar mind to your own, right? That's called collective action, refers to actions taken to get together by a group of people whose goal is to enhance their condition and achieve a common objective. So you have like-minded people, and you see that image on the right there. So you see in the red there it says corruption. The only way to beat corruption is to organize, and that's where the rest of the fish all look like a shark, is to organize to sort of take down the corruption because you have more power if you're organized and as a solid group. The other part of this is what's called direct action, where you have a specific goal in mind, and you've seen this a zillion times. This is where you have sit-ins or boycotts or blockades. There was a big one several years ago for the climate change summit. Those always don't always work. It could be sort of a short-term band-aid to shed light on a cause, but the problem is a lot of times those end up being either violent or just they're not very constructive. So the stakeholders who are involved with that particular cause, the key stakeholders, have a tendency to feel alienated because they don't want to be involved in all of that stuff, the clashes with the police and all that stuff. They may believe in the goal, but they don't necessarily believe in how that goal is being achieved. Another way an individual can work towards a sustainable future is by working directly with the government. So you can do this by being a member of a council or lobbying or supporting some type of politician who has a like mind to your own. You see this all the time. If this particular politician believes in cleaning up my pond in my backyard, well, I'm going to support him, and that's just kind of how it works. You have these advisory councils, like the environmental advisory councils and the conservation advisory commissions. Now, these could be statewide. There's individual ones. It's not just one council or committee, excuse me, commission, but they're sort of advisory groups that help make decisions in communities. So now you hear the term watchdogs, and again, that's like tree hugger. Watchdog groups it's sort of a derogatory term because it implies an antagonistic relationship. You better not do this or we're going to come after you. Well, a lot of times that can be counterproductive. What you want is to work with, if you develop a proposal that's going to save money, save energy, and sustainable, you're more likely to have the government officials look at that than just sort of cross your arms and look at them and go, if you do anything wrong, we're going to come after you. That doesn't work very well in government settings. All right. Also, on top of that, if you really want to get involved, you could run for office yourself. And I've actually met a few people that did this. That they ran for alderman or whatever it is, common council, um, just because they had a specific agenda, so to speak, in terms of what they wanted to accomplish, and they didn't see anybody else going after that particular problem, so they went and did it themselves. Another way an individual can create some change is by what's called sustainable investment. So if you have a retirement account, a 401k, you can take that. You have more options now where you can take your money and put it into companies that generate measurable, beneficial social environmental impact and provide a financial return. So, and you can see that in this diagram a little bit. The blue area underneath is what's called ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, which is a sort of a metric used to determine how much a company is sort of playing a role in the sustainable future. There are other metrics as well they talk about in the book, but that, since it was on this particular chart, that was the one I wanted to bring up. So this is, a huge idea that you can now invest in um, these companies that want to play a role, and it's a win-win situation. So you invest your money, they get bigger, expand, create more social and environmental change, and then they make money, which means you get back your investment in your retirement account. So it's sort of a win-win that way. And what I found interesting is that the millennials are twice as uh, likely to invest in these types of companies or funds to promote sustainability. So over the next, 30, 40 years, you're going to see this much, much more because as they get closer to retirement age, if they've been doing this all along, that'll bode well for not only the companies that are practicing these environmental, social, and governments, but so those well the millennials will give them a chance to grow, but then the millennials will also have sort of that social justice feeling that they've done something good over the course of their lifetime towards retirement. As an individual, you can only do so much, but when you start to get into the power of numbers, when you have more and more people, that's where social movements start. One of the issues that comes up quite a bit is trying to include everybody who's involved. Like in the book, it talks about how the Latino community is very strong on environmental concerns. It comes from sort of their background and explains that in the book. But yet they're not very big on environmental or social, social movements. They don't get involved as much. In fact, when they found, it says in the book that they were never asked. You have this huge contingent of people who care very deeply for their environment and their land and everything else, but they were never asked to join. So if you're going to have a social or environmental movement like this, you have to make sure that everybody who's affected or who cares about this is at least brought to the party. What this does also is if you want to try to provide the poorest people with the tools, choices, and processes so they can start to live a more sustainable life too. It's real easy if you have money to drive an electric car, to be more sustainable. And you see this with, I hate to point this out, but you see this with like movie stars, right? Oh, you got to do this, 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 and this. Well, they got oodles of money. They got millions of dollars. They could do whatever they want. What about people who are poor or even, I don't have tons of money. I can't do all of that stuff. I can't afford a Tesla. Not only that, it doesn't make sense for me because I need to haul stuff. I don't need a car. I need a truck or at least an SUV. So not everybody has the same economic level, is at the same economic level. So you have to be able to allow these tools to be accessed by everyone, not just the wealthy. So increasing access to sustainable housing and home improvement should be made available to the poor. So when you, regardless of your income status, you should be able to save some money on your heating bills by doing something as simple as adding insulation to your attic, things like that. Increase access to sustainable food. We did that whole chapter on that pretty much. Okay. You know, the food desert issue, getting fresh fruits and vegetables to the poorest areas in the urban neighborhoods, things like that. That should only be fair. Why should they only be in the suburbs? You should get fresh fruits and vegetables everywhere. And then a big one nowadays is closing the digital divide because we all use our cell phones for things like, social media, and social media is a huge part of now, environmental activism and moving forward with an idea or a movement. And in many parts of the world, they don't have access to the digital type of stuff that we have, whether it be, even just weather forecasts, right? I mean, if it's hard to imagine that in our country, but there are people that don't know if it's going to rain or snow tomorrow, rain or not rain tomorrow. So the idea is by closing that digital divide, getting, internet of some sort to everyone, everybody becomes sort of on the same playing field and can start to generate these ideas, start to figure out what needs to be done where. In conclusion, how do you increase the power of individuals? The first thing is education and exposure to global realities, and the alleviation of fear, guilt, and the feeling of powerlessness are huge driving forces. We mentioned that in previous slides and in the last chapter. Until you see it firsthand, a lot of people just ignore it. The old term out of sight, out of mind. That's why this class that I had never taught before has really opened my eyes to some of this stuff. I kind of knew about it, but I never thought about it a lot. Entrepreneurship, getting more people that have the ability to sink the money into and take the risk, but not only just for profit, but for social and environmental practices as well. And then working with government and citizen science and sustainable investment. All of these things sort of help. This is sort of the money part of it, where you back up the ideas with the money to get things done. It's easy in the corporate world, right? There's investors and this and that and stockholders, but social or social entrepreneurship is more of a new thing, but it's gaining steam. Now, a social movement is a group of loosely organized people, and we've used this term before, that work together to achieve a common goal. And social media plays a huge role in that. Things like hashtag this and hashtag that and make this trending. But it works. And because things like Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all of these, now TikTok and all of them, they're global. I mean, you post something, and if somebody cares about it, they share it and share it and share it. Pretty soon, we call it going viral or whatever you want to call it now. But it's not just the U.S. This is a global thing. So social movements, sometimes that grassroots effort can grow into more of a social movement, which could eventually grow into what we call an organization with that has an actual structure in place to get things done. All right, so like I mentioned, this was kind of a short chapter. I'm assuming the next two are going to be kind of like this as well. It's interesting stuff. I learned a lot in terms of, you know, you don't feel guilty for doing a little, maybe feel guilty for not doing anything, but try to do something. And for me, since I've been doing this chapter and the last chapter, especially the garbage one, just blew my mind. I'm really going out of my way to make sure every piece of recyclable material is getting in my bins. I used to be kind of lackadaisical with it, but I'm really trying to make sure every little piece of cardboard, paper, full, aluminum, whatever can go in there, I'm trying to get it in there now. And I've been telling my wife and kids the same thing. Just put it on the counter. I'll put it in there. But if you think it could be recycled, let's recycle it. All right. So I hope you learned something, and I'll see you on the next chapter. Thank you.